What design does your higher self have for you? Your true soul self. It will probably be along the lines of joy, expansion, adventure, experience. But we in this human form have learnt to be afraid or careful or untrusting of certain aspects that can come into life. So now that the energy, the astrology is building up, this build up can sound like fun, but a bit like a wave that is fun. If it's a bit bigger, then it's scary. What if we were ready? What if we can align with our higher self and say, okay, just like a child, like the mum says, cross the road now, and it's the right moment. What if we learn to surrender our willfulness to being guided by something like an intelligence within us? So the ego knows best, I know best, yet it only knows, so it's not necessarily wrong, but it only knows what it knows. And the quantum knows everything, also knows what you're afraid of and what you truly desire. So the analogy of the ocean and a current pulling you into a direction that looks wrong. I'm looking at the coast and it's pulling me into the ocean, and that is wrong. So I'm going to try and swim to the coast. And the more effort I make to what I perceive as the right direction, it's going to tire us out. It's going to be frustrating and difficult. But if I could understand that the higher self might be pulling me into the ocean, and if I float, it will push me back at a different destination. But that is where the quantum, the higher self, wants us. It seems wrong. It feels wrong. But only to our construction. What if our higher self, our soul self, the quantum self, very patiently is trying to flow us into our better self? There we go. How often does something occur, something beautiful, when we give up, when we give in, when you say, I don't want to try anymore. And then because we're not interfering, it actually comes out quite nicely. So imagine doing that consciously. So the transmission is to create some like a rapport between ego mind and higher mind, as if it were like a child and a parent, or in this case, us and a higher self, or a wise being, the wise you. Here we go. Just imagine how fear, and the purpose of fear is to keep you safe. It has a purpose. But if we become overly fearful, we will stop getting out of our comfort zone. We will stop trying new things, or we won't embrace change. So, what if fear didn't have such a tight grip on you? For now, that's enough. What if it gave you a little bit of wiggle room? Okay. And part of the fear is not knowing. So let's say, how long is this current going to pull me into what I perceive as the wrong direction? And how do I know it is a current? And how do I know it's going to bring me back? First of all, the design is that this was the original design. Instinct, flow, guidance. So fear and conditioning and protection would be what we think is keeping us safe. So we've learned to listen to repetitive stimulus, and we created it as a identity. But what if beyond that there's some coaxing that says internally, allow yourself to be pulled into what appears the wrong direction and given back to the coast exactly where you need to be. Okay, so we're repeating this phrase that you're always guided from a higher perspective, from a wiser self. And fear will be the stick in the wheel. It will be what stops you taking action, although it looks like it's keeping you safe. So there's some sort of transmission about to come through about slightly cleaning your instinct and realigning it to its original station, frequency. Okay. So there's nothing wrong in the way that you've learnt. But we might have made assumptions that block our flow. So just imagine so it's more about the imagination, not about a specific assumption. Just understand that with the knowledge that you had at the moment you had that thought, that assumption, it might be off track, out of balance. So create that softness, just understanding that your assumptions, again, give it some wiggle room. So an assumption can be something as simple as I felt sick or unpleasant after eating an ice cream. Ice creams must be bad for me. Maybe it was that one time, maybe it wasn't even the ice cream. So it's these assumptions. They don't want you to know which assumption, just understand that there are so many ways of experiencing something, but if you look it into your expectation, your assumption, so it's about creating space there. And then it's also about just not following guidance blindly, because it's not external guidance. It's an inner knowingness. And so when your intuition has been hijacked by fear, low esteem, confusion, history, it makes sense not to do certain things. So your inner guidance system, your intuition, is going to be cleaned or freed as much as possible. Imagine if your guidance system were aligned and something is pulling you to take action. And so, yes, you might feel apprehension because it's out of your comfort zone, or you've done it before, it didn't go very well. But all of a sudden, it is the right thing to do. So it's about trusting your instinct, your inner guidance system. So the fight between instinct and the mind, because the mind will do pro and cons, and it will look up history, and it will find anything similar, and the whole purpose of the ego, of the mind, is to keep you safe. It's not necessarily invested in your growth. Yet consciousness, all it wants is to grow, to expand, to experience. So allow the guidance system to be more of an heart-based, instinct-based fuel. If it's coming from a sensation, a pull, so something might look like a bad idea, and yet it's the right thing to do. And sometimes something looks like a great idea, and it might not be the right thing to do. In these last series, we're creating two consciousness within yourself, knowing the ego is a perfect planner, the mind is a very good strategist, but the heart does things sometimes irrational to the mind. So allow your heart to open, to flower. So in this plane, we are usually, if we're lucky, 70% mind, 30 instinct, the right type of instinct, not fearful instinct. So even if we're 50-50, the heart and the mind, 50-50, working in unison. And if we could have a 17-30 mind over heart, we could have a 60-40 heart over head. This is all about getting comfortable with small prompts, with a certain type of logic. If it could be out of balance in one direction, it could be a little less out of balance, but still out of balance in the other. What would that look like if I was more heart-based, more in the flow, on the flower of the heart? And not to kick your mind to the curb, but to listen. Yes, there might be something to be aware of or to be wary of. There we go. I've heard of so many logically impossible stories of musicians here in Argentina. The most known one, or at least most popular, is Messi. One of the best footballers was told he would never be good at football. Had he listened to that information and said, oh, well, I'll do something else, he wouldn't be having the experience he is today. Yet his passion, his drive made him push through. And we now have our footballer the way he is. Just a little bit more. Your higher self, your quantum self, the consciousness always wants to grow. But growth seems dangerous to the self, to the ego self. So what if the ego could know that consciousness, the quantum, would ask for the right thing for you? And when you start to know what the right thing is, you don't necessarily want to go after the wrong thing. If it's ego propelled or status propelled or anything that isn't the true self. The true self isn't against you becoming well-known, famous, or successful. The true self is aligned to your happiness. What if you could start to distinguish between one voice and the other? Okay. Okay, deep breath in